Hi, welcome to part three of my series on Pena Blanca at the south end of the Oregon Mountains in Doñana County, New Mexico. Pena Blanca is this isolated hill that's off by itself. It's all been carved into these faces, every one of those shelters, and been carved out by man, and I'll show you that in a bit. So in part one, I showed how this whole ridge in Pena Blanca area has been disturbed, and it forms this scale forms a geoglyph of what looks like a gorilla riding a donkey, which I didn't find surprising, but I didn't understand why it was here. In part two, I showed you how this ridgeline has all been carved, and even the rocks have been carved into giant bas reliefs of these characters here. One which obviously looks like Dracula. I speculated that these prehistoric tribes that were here were responsible for this icon of Dracula that we still have today, but I didn't understand what it represented. And then now I believe these other heads are faces of the same character from different parts of the world. So this might be an Asian version of Dracula with a pointy ear and a scary looking mouth, wearing a mask or something on his head too. And then to the right is in the purplish darker rock another face. Could also be wearing a mask of an animal. Again, one of these characters from somewhere in the world. And the coloration on the south side of the hill looks like this really scary pointy nosed guy with a pointy ear also. Hill just to the north here, you can see a face of an elf. Another sort of pointy-eared character wearing an animal mask. And a couple more versions of elves. So elves are a Viking icon, and if you look at these hills in this way, it appears to be a pointy helmet guy, like a Viking, and he's pointing a ship to the south. Look at one of these rock ridge lines in another way, and it looks kind of Asian and like a boatload of people. So there are indications that people from different parts of the world and cultures were here. I think these represent different versions of the same character that we know as Dracula. I've been out there a few times now, and you can see that the entire hillside looks like a head with a wing or a white ear, almost like a Mercury character, from different angles. And then you can see all the divisions in the landscape, all the disturbances that make up these geoglyphs I've been showing you. And it's indeed all been carved. There's drill holes and indications that it's all been carved by man. I've explored a bunch of it now, and it's pretty verifiably man-made. And when you get out there, you start seeing other pointy-eared characters carved into the rock or even painted on the rock. These are just a few examples. And I again believe that this all represent the same character, but from different parts of the world. So I was looking at a black and white printout of the area and started drawing in the shapes I found, and realized that there were some more pointy-eared and pointy-nosed characters, and started realizing that it looked like it was people wearing masks, the masks of rodents and other animals, wearing horns and bird feathers and wings on the side of their head. I also noticed that in this one way it looked like a large figure of Dracula cloaked in animal skins with animals around him, and he appears to be feeding the animals with hand puppets. When you look at it another way, you can see this figure that's a fairly realistic man facing to the north. This could be an actual death glyph for an actual person who may have looked a little bit like this. He has what appears to be a marsupial-like pouch strapped on over his shoulder, and he has hand puppets in both hands. So taking in consideration all the various things I've seen in the satellite photos and on the ground there, I started to realize that these are depictions of people who are zookeepers, veterinarians, and the people involved in animal husbandry, and that Dracula appears to be the icon of the Zookeeper Guild, and that the pointy nose and the pointy ears and the fangs, it all comes from zookeepers wearing the disguises of animals so that they can feed and take care of them. These are the same kind of practices that modern day zookeepers use to this day. And when you go exploring out there, you just see it everywhere. There's just carvings of animals and people and heads. And this was just a fortuitous picture my wife took that happened to capture this scene of one of these guys. He's got his arm inside an animal. There's all these other animals around. All the rock has been chipped and pecked at and painted on to form pictures. So all those various colorations form art in themselves. A lot of it depicts different figures, again, that look like Dracula. And if you look in the upper right, you see a gorilla looking at you. Every angle, everywhere you're out there, you take a picture and there's animals. Here's a guy that appears to be reclining amongst a bunch of animals. If you look in the right foreground, you see a head of a bull at the top, and then in the red, you see a figure of a man. It's real subtly done. They just took rocks and stacked them up and made it look like, from a distance, what they wanted to see, including elephants. There's a lot of elephants carved into the rocks out there, and even painted onto the rocks. And then some of these figures, if you look at them different ways, also form faces of Dracula. A nursemaid feeding babies or animals. Another carving of a man reaching into the mouth of an animal. Another carving above that. It's all real apparent and obvious that man did this. But I don't know why we seem to think that nature did. If you look at it, you can see the drill holes, the peck marks, where they carved out big chunks of rock. They were carving these figures out of the rock, hauling them off to other places to be in tombs probably. And then the shelters around have been carved and painted with mineral paint to form different pictures. A guy here with the animal head on his head. Again, he looks to have a marsupial pouch strapped on over his shoulder. Different depictions of Dracula and animals. Pointy nose characters, and you can note the dark patina on the side of this hill. The whole place should look like that, but it's all carved and it's very light colored, very fresh material. Not the millions of years of patination it should have. A giant face looking up from above. Those rocks are going to make some sort of eye. You'll be able to see them. Giant boulders carved into faces. You can see where it's been chipped at. In the dark area is the patina. Really obvious heads and characters carved into the side of the hill. Why modern man can sit here and say that nature is so wonderful it carved these things, it's just ridiculous. A sphinx. And then here's how Pena Blanca was carved out. There's these big drill holes everywhere, and they filled the holes with a type of cement material, And they drilled so many holes that eventually the whole side of the hill became just mostly the cement material, and then they carved it out into various figures. It allowed them to do some pretty elaborate carving. Here's an example of a boulder that's come off the side of Pena Blanca. It has the drill holes in it where it's white. That's the mortar that they put in the holes, and then it's been carved. So this boulder could be more than 50% mortar. Feline figure carved into a boulder that's again has these drill holes filled with mortar going through it. And then this is how they were digging out the shelters. They were hand drilling holes into the rock. They're small diameter and they're not straight. They were done with wooden shafted drills, all hand done. I can tell you without a doubt that this isn't historic mining. There are no minerals in this volcanic tuff. It wouldn't be worth the amount of work you see in here to try to get anything. You'd have to have gold or something even more valuable than gold to put the kind of effort into carving up all this rock around here to try to get a mineral out of it. Now that I showed you on the ground what this ridge looks like, all the carvings and figures and paintings, let's look at it from above again. Appears to be a figure vomiting on the left, just like the hand puppet of this guy. Noticed a couple other areas where it looked like people were vomiting, and I started thinking about the regurgitation of food for birds and animals. And it looks like a bird head in the dark area at the top of this. Flip it around and look in a sort of low-res picture. You can see the hand puppets and the guy at the bottom that has these hand puppets on his arm. Flip it around. The whole thing could be a hand puppet. And again, you can see some of the animal shapes. Another way to look at it, kind of cut this area out to show this guy feeding an animal here. Another figure maybe with a hand puppet, wearing a mask and animal clothing. And then possibly feeding with a prosthetic breast. And I've seen this in a couple areas. If you were going to feed young gorillas and apes, you might wear a sort of a fake breast and feed animals milk through that so that they would be comfortable with you if you're wearing a gorilla suit. There's different ways to look at it, different figures doing things with animals. Every which way you look at it. And you flip over and look at it from this angle, it looks pretty cool. Can be a character on the left reaching out and putting his hand in the mouth of somebody, causing them to vomit. It could be doing a rectal probe. It could be tying a bundle around the character's waist. There's all kinds of different faces and figures and ways to look at this. It's pretty amazing. They could do this on a rocky hillside. Now back on the ground, there's things like this really giant boulder that's been carved into a skull. Has hieroglyphs carved all around on all sides of it. Everywhere you look, there appeared to be figures of pointy-eared guys that look like Dracula. And then there's caves and shelters all over this hill. So think about it. This could have been a really large prehistoric zoo. It could have been exotic animals kept in these basically cages that came from all over the world. And the example here that's been carved out into a pretty nice habitat for animals. And then you see figures of people with animals and cloaked in animal skins all over the place. This one looks like he's sneaking up on animals wearing an animal skin. And then everywhere, little touches, these giant rocks that look like animal heads with the little bird and turtle that are just these little subtle chipped pieces of rock. And finally, I just wanted to point out this area that is almost completely devoid of vegetation after hundreds of years even. So it makes me think that they must have been using animal waste as an herbicide. We have to think about the prehistory of this area as being more like the Roman Empire was here, and not like the lifestyle of the Pueblo Indian that we seem to project back into prehistory. And how amazing is it, on top of this mountain, there's Dracula just hanging out, looking at the sky, taking a break, with his animals around him. It's just incredible. And I can't believe that people just don't know this is here and can't realize that this is real.